Winchester, the gun that won the West. The gun that won the West started in the mind of a man born in a new America. A fountain pen, a safety pin, a sewing machine, and a repeating mechanism for a breech-loading long gun. All were invented by Walter Hunt, born in 1796. Though a prolific inventor, Hunt realized little profit from his efforts. One of his inventions was an innovative firearm named the volitional repeater because of its tubular magazine under the gun's barrel. U.S. patent number 6663, it was a brilliant achievement that pioneered new thinking for firearms. Hunt also devised, patented, and designed a loaded bullet, a hollow-based conical projectile filled with powder, which was closed off by a cork plug. The first attempt at modern ammunition had been made. Prolific in thought, but financially in trouble, Hunt assigned his patents in 1849 to George Arrowsmith, who hired Lewis Jennings to simplify the volitional repeater. He did. The Jennings rifle was the result. Cortlandt C. Palmer bought the Jennings-Hunt rights and in 1850 contracted Robbins and Lawerence, the largest private arsenal in America at the time, to build 5,000 Jennings patent rifles. Two men improved the design of the gun, Smith and Wesson, names to become synonymous with firearms. Yet in 1852, even after improved patents, the Jennings was discontinued. Smith and Wesson formed a limited partnership in Norwich, Connecticut, to produce repeating firearms, primarily pistols. Smith, Wesson, and their partner Palmer sold, assigned, or transferred all their design and patent assets in 1855. A new corporation in New Haven, Connecticut, using Smith & Wesson patents was established. The new company paid the partners $56,000, a handsome sum of money in 1855. The Volcanic Repeating Arms Company was capitalized by some 40 New Haven and New York businessmen for $150,000.
The Volcanic pistol operates essentially as a Winchester rifle would by moving the lever forward. The gun is cocked, the cartridge is chambered, and then can be fired. The most unique feature of the Volcanic firearms were the cartridges. The cartridge itself was just a lead bullet, or appeared to be a lead bullet. Its base, however, was hollowed out, filled with gunpowder, a piece of cork, and then a primer. When the cartridge was chambered into the barrel, here, firing pin struck the primer, ignited it, and the bullet left the barrel. In 1860, the New Haven Arms Company, under Oliver F. Winchester, began development of a self-contained cartridge, much the same as used in the Smith & Wesson revolvers of the same period.
The company had difficulties in manufacturing and lacked working capital. By August 1856, one of the investors, Oliver F. Winchester, emerged as a key supporter and financial backer of the floundering company. After 2 years of struggle, the Volcanic Firearms Company was insolvent, and in March 1857 was acquired by Oliver F. Winchester, who became the assignee for all patents and machinery. He now controlled the company. In time, the name Winchester would become the layman's term for repeating rifle. Even the legendary John Wayne would shout, "Hand me my Winchester," not "Give me my rifle." Before his name became synonymous with rifles, Oliver Winchester was a successful shirt manufacturer. At age 46, Winchester saw the gun of the future and seized his opportunity to become a multi-millionaire. By April of 1857, he reorganized the company under its new name, the New Haven Arms Company, and became its first president and treasurer. As a businessman, Winchester demonstrated his ability to select key people by naming Benjamin Tyler Henry his plant manager. Under Henry's supervision, the New Haven Arms Company continued to produce essentially the same firearms and ammunition as had the Volcanic Company: 2 small caliber pistols and 3 different size carbines. By 1860, the New Haven Arms Company employed 68 people, 40 men, the rest women and children, whose primary job was the manufacturing of ammunition. Winchester employed a common practice of the time in selling his gun, the testimonial. Machine-made guns were a novelty, and testimonials were essential to overcome the prejudice of the time. New York, 23rd November, 1856.
Gentlemen, I have used a volcanic repeating pistol for some months on my last voyage to San Francisco, and in all that constitutes a good pistol or firearm, it has no equal and excels all others I have ever seen in rapidity, efficiency, and certainty of execution. Fred K.A. Stahl, Commander Ship, Star of the Union.
New York, March 10th, 1855.
Gentlemen, I consider the volcanic repeating pistol the ne plus ultra of repeating or revolving arms, and far superior to Colt's much extolled revolver. I have shown it to my friends in San Francisco, Hong Kong, Manila, Canton, and Shanghai, and they were much pleased with it. C.F.W. Beam, late of clipper ship Staghound.
The New Haven Company was attempting to cut into the business of the handgun giant Colt. The effort was futile. With his patent rights, Sam Colt had virtually a lock on the handgun market. By 1859, he was manufacturing thousands monthly. Winchester and his group could not beat the Hartford giant. In spite of the enthusiasm of the New Haven Arms Company owners from 1857 to 1861, the company's volcanic gun sales were small, and by 1861, the firm was virtually bankrupt. The basic fault with the volcanic arms was its ammunition. The gun itself was one of the pathfinders for the use of self-contained metallic cartridge ammunition. Benjamin Tyler Henry developed a cartridge which saved the New Haven Arms Company and revolutionized the small arms world. It came in the form of a metallic cartridge with a base-flanged copper case and the igniting agent fulminate of mercury around the lower outer circumference of the flange. Crimped in the mouth of the copper case was a black powder propellant and a round-nosed lead projectile. Henry developed the .44 caliber rimfire cartridge loaded with 26 grains of black powder. As soon as he had a usable cartridge, Henry set out to redesign the volcanic action to accept the new ammunition. He adapted the bolt and firing pin to load, fire, and extract the rimfire cartridge. In October 1860, Henry was granted a U.S. patent, which he assigned to the New Haven Arms Company. Thus began the gun that became one of the first successful repeating shoulder guns. The Henry rifle was similar to the volcanic, but its performance and reliability were greatly improved. The magazine, consisting of a slotted metal tube under the barrel, was capable of holding 15 rounds. A section of the magazine near the muzzle swung to one side to permit loading. It contained a spring that forced the ammunition to the rear against the carrier block. The rifle had a 24-inch barrel and weighed 10 pounds. To say that the ultimate success of the Winchester lay with Benjamin Tyler Henry is an understatement. Until the end of the 19th century, the New Haven Arms Company would follow Henry's format for gun and ammunition design. His contribution to the company was truly outstanding. Yet, Oliver Winchester and his successors refused to grant Henry a royalty. Through the years, this precedent hurt the company. The ultimate business negotiator, Oliver Winchester, gave Henry a contract on behalf of the company to manufacture 5,000 rifles. Under this agreement, Henry was to employ, supervise, and pay the workers himself, with the company supplying only the plant equipment and raw material. The difference between his cost and the contract price to the New Haven Arms Company was to be Henry's income. During this 5-year agreement, Henry doubled his income to $15,000 for that period. This did not include any reward for the redesign of the gun or its ammunition. In fact, it was Oliver Winchester who profited. He got a new rifle for virtually nothing. Benjamin Tyler Henry was simply his employee. With the Henry repeating rifle, the New Haven Arms Company stopped manufacturing pistols and concentrated on the shoulder gun. By 1862, the company's future had improved. The war between the states was in its full fury, and the federal government was hungry for anything that could shoot.
The Civil War certainly introduced the repeating rifle as a concept. It found its market in the post-war period among civilians as opposed to the military. And there's a number of reasons for that. First, both the Spencer and the Henry had cartridges which had a limited range. The Army insisted on being able to fire to ranges out to 600 yards, whereas a weapon such as this would only be good to 150 yards, maybe 200 yards in the extreme. As a consequence, it was very difficult to get a cartridge with enough power to get that range into a weapon of this size. So the U.S. Army stayed until 1892 with the single-shot breech-loading rifle. Henry and the Winchester became very popular with both the civilian American moving west on the frontier and with his red man adversary. The Henry rifle was the first of what I think one would consider the first of the modern repeating breech-loading rifles which had any success in a commercial sense. The Spencer stayed around for many years, but it never gained the popularity that the Henry did. The Henry was introduced right at the beginning of the Civil War as a commercial item and quickly gained popularity among a number of small military units, mostly volunteer units, groups like the Illinois Infantry, J.T. Wilder's brigade from Indiana, small units which saw the advantage of a repeating weapon for close-in fighting.
In spite of its need, the federal military authorities were not enthusiastic toward repeating firearms. Brigadier General James Ripley, Chief of Ordnance for the Army, in a letter to Simon Cameron offers the military's attitude regarding repeating rifles. Quote, "I regard the weight of the arms with the loaded magazine as objectionable, and also the requirement of special ammunition rendering it impossible to use the arms with ordinary cartridges or with powder and ball, whether they will be safe for transportation with the fulminate in the cartridge. Also, the effort on the spiral spring of long use and exposure in the field. I do not discover any important advantage of these arms over several other breech loaders. I do not consider it advisable to entertain the proposition for purchasing these arms. Ripley would not order any Henry rifles for the Union until the summer of 1863, when 250 guns were ordered. Many in the Army who were fighting saw the advantage of the repeating rifles, yet those in charge of purchasing did not. Winchester never sold more than 1,700 rifles to the U.S. Ordnance Department during the war. But in that same period, private military purchases were over 4 times the government purchase. If the military leadership did not see the advantages to the repeater, the soldier did. Over 4.5 million cartridges were sold to the government. Someone was buying the gun. Although the Henry was outsold by other repeaters, in some cases 10-1, Oliver Winchester made his gun the repeating rifle of America. During the war between the states, the South never did secure the Henry rifle. To the men in Lee's army, the Henry was that damned Yankee rifle that can be loaded on Sunday and fired all week.
The Spencer carbine was developed and issued in large quantities to the Northern forces, and the Winchester Company, or actually its predecessor, the New Haven Arms Company, developed the Henry rifle, capable of firing 14 rounds in rapid succession, and described by A.P. Hill, the Confederate general, as the gun that could be loaded on Sunday and fired all week long. The U.S. government refused to adopt the Henry rifle as a standard issue weapon, fearing that troops using it would waste ammunition. Regiments, fearing for their own lives and wanting something that would protect them properly, purchased these at $45 or more per gun for their own use. Among the guns at the end of the Civil War which Union soldiers purchased for their own use, Henry's ranked first in preference, followed by Spencer and Sharp's carbines. Colt revolvers ranked 8th in that purchase.
When Winchester discovered that the Spencer Arms Company had held a demonstration of its rifle in the backyard of the White House and that Abraham Lincoln had fired the Spencer, he sent Lincoln a Henry rifle, serial number 6. Taking a page out of Sam Colt's book of product promotion, Winchester sent other highly engraved presentation Henry repeaters to top government officials. Serial number 1 was presented to Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War. Serial number 9 to Connecticut's Gideon Welles, Secretary of the Navy. The government did not buy, at least not in any consequence, so Oliver Winchester placed his hopes and his company's future with the private sector. America spent 4 bloody years, 1861 to 1865, to decide the fate of her Union. Hundreds of thousands died. The South was brought to her knees, then forced to lie in her own ruin and own rubble. Washington and Jefferson's America was gone, and in her place was a country catapulted into adulthood by blood. Lincoln and Grant's new America had set her course for the 20th century and industrial dominance of the world. The New Haven Arms Company was to become a major part of America's drive on that course. After the war between the states, the West became the country's focus for both the North and the South. The frontier gave the country the opportunity to build a new life, a new future. Once again, the country and its people were on the move. With the future in mind, Oliver Winchester in 1865 petitioned the Connecticut State Legislature for the formation of a new company, the Henry Repeating Rifle Company. However, in May of 1866, he changed its name to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The change in the new corporate title suggests that Benjamin Tyler Henry and Oliver F. Winchester were not on good terms. Something happened between the two men in 1865. Henry left the employ of Winchester when the new manufacturing plant for the arms company was set up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Henry was not to enjoy the growth and rewards of the new company. One can only speculate as to what caused the rift. He remained in New Haven and ran a small gun and machine shop until his death in 1898. In 1866, Oliver Winchester moved his manufacturing location, changed his plant supervisor, and introduced the gun that was to bring the company one step closer to becoming the American standard for repeating arms. The Model 1866. The 66 was an improved Henry. Nelson King, the new plant supervisor, redesigned the gun. Although he still incorporated a rimfire cartridge, the changes he made greatly improved the rifle. The slot at the underside of the Henry was gone. The magazine tube was protected by a wooden forearm and had a loading gate on the right side of the gun's frame, making it much easier to load. King's new method of loading the rifle is still employed today. With Nelson King's changes, Oliver Winchester now had a gun the American public loved.
And his repeating rifle then came just at the right time because it was ideal for Western conditions. Once the 66 was well established, say by the middle, well, let's say late 60s, an Indian, particularly the Plains Indian, a Winchester was a tremendous prize. I have heard that an Indian would trade, a Sioux would trade 20 ponies for one Winchester 66.
With the added demand as a result of the Model 66, Winchester moved the manufacturing operation to a larger factory he built on property he owned. The company grew in foreign military sales as well. By 1869, Winchester had 260 employees, twice as many as during the war between the states. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company was home and has remained home to this day. New Haven, Connecticut.
There was a salesman named Thomas Addis, and he came over into the early days of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. He was a very vivacious individual. So he was sent over to Turkey with a model of a Winchester for the trials of the Turkish army, I think in 1870 or late 69. And part of the gun trial was to open the breech of a rifle that had been submitted, put it on a blanket, throw sand into the open mechanism, then take the blanket and shake it to get the sand integrated all through the mechanism. And part of the specification was that if a gun became inoperative, it should be put back into operating condition with some tool that a soldier in the Turkish army was regularly equipped with. Addis knew that the Winchester wouldn't work with the sand in the breech. So apparently conditions were right. He urinated in the breech and washed out the sand. There was a great, hey, you can't do that, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, the Winchester worked fine because Addis had cleaned it up. Addis said, wait a minute, whoop. I didn't use any tool but what every soldier in the Turkish army has.
Growth was such, the company now went on a buying spree. The Spencer Repeating Rifle Company was absorbed by Winchester, a purchase which must have given Oliver Winchester much satisfaction. For the Spencer rifle had outsold the Henry by 10-1 during the war between the states. With the acquisition of the Spencer Arms Company and the American Repeating Rifle Company in the Boston area, Winchester guaranteed its dominance in the firearms industry by buying out its competition and controlling competitive patents. For a 6-year period after the war, Winchester Firearms Company was making money. Its net worth had increased by over $720,000, a tremendous increase, especially when one realizes this was almost all profit. In 1873, Winchester made the gun that won the West. The 1873, the Winchester 73. The gun was similar to the Model 66. The toggle link repeating action was the same, but the firing pin was changed to handle the new centerfire 4440 brass case ammunition. With the more powerful ammunition, the 73 had a much greater range.
The rimfire cartridge was redesigned. The two outstanding designs were made by Colonel Boxer and Colonel Berdan, both of whom utilized a separate primer in a little cup made of soft enough material to be deformed by the firing pin, and then seated in the center of a cartridge case, again made of brass this time, and of a much harder material and much heavier and thicker, so that you could utilize much higher working pressures in order to get the velocities that were necessary. A typical transition was from the model 1866 Winchester, which used 44 rimfire cartridges, to the model 1873 Winchester, which had practically the same mechanism, however, was modified slightly in order to be able to use a centerfire cartridge of approximately the same size, using higher pressures, getting ballistics considerably superior.
By 1875, it was a household word, a household necessity on the western plains and mountains. The pioneer, hunter, and trapper believed in Winchester, and it was a passion with the Indians. The Winchester had found its way to every foreign country in the world. The introduction of the 73 came in the year the country was experiencing the worst depression in its history, a depression to last almost 20 years. The gun proved extremely popular. The factory saw sales drop drastically. The company slashed prices by almost 50%. Buffalo. From 1870 to 1885, the opening of the American frontier was achieved, not by the homesteader, but by the buffalo hunter. The great American buffalo herds were killed off in the decade of the 70s. Had they not been exterminated, there is a likelihood the frontier would not have been tamed. For the massive herds could run for days, obliterating anything in their path. Towns, crops, domestic animals could never have coexisted with the herds. Only one would survive. With the introduction of an improved tanning process, the buffalo herds became a business for thousands of out-of-work veterans and would-be settlers. The Depression and the demand for buffalo leather, both for home and industrial use, sounded the death toll of the buffalo and the end of the open range for the American Indian. During this period, the Model 76, a gun of even greater power, 45-75 caliber, was released in hopes of taking some of the buffalo hunter trade. But the Sharps and Remington single-shot high-powered rifles controlled that market.
They tried to develop even more powerful cartridges for the Model 1876 to get in on the buffalo hunting with a bigger and more powerful gun than the 73, but they came too late. The heyday of the buffalo was over by the mid-70s and the late 70s. And Sharps was still holding their own with a single-shot rifle.
The company concentrated on the American sporting and domestic market. and maintained its fine reputation with foreign governments for military contracts. On December 10, 1880, Oliver F. Winchester, guiding force and prime mover of the repeating firearms company bearing his name, died. At 70 years of age, Winchester personified the American dream of success. He was a child from a large Boston family who had been bonded off to a farmer after his mother's premature death and later on apprenticed to a carpenter. As a young man, he opened his own construction firm, then a dry goods store. In time, he saw another need, this time for men's shirts. In the shirt industry, he became a wealthy man. Yet at the age of 45, he saw yet another opportunity. This time, it took the form of the repeating rifle. In 25 years, he formed a company that was to be one of the best known and most profitable in the country. Devoted to the success of his company, he nonetheless personally profited, living the life of a 19th century millionaire. His 4,000 shares of Winchester Repeating Arms was at the time valued at $1.5 million. In today's marketplace, the value would be $50 to $70 million. Not bad for a farm boy from Boston. The country was settling the West, and industry in America was moving into high gear to fulfill the demand for wagons, tools, plows, barbed wire, and guns. With the death of William Wirt Winchester, Oliver's son, in 1881, the company's future was placed in the hands of William W. Converse, a family member, and T.J. Bennett, Oliver Winchester's son-in-law. Converse was elected president by the board of directors, and Thomas G. Bennett was eventually elected company treasurer. Basically a family-owned and operated business, Winchester was on its way to dominating the rifle and ammunition industry. From 1879 to 1889, the factory had become one of the biggest employers in the New Haven area. In 1879, 600 workers were employed. By 1889, there were 1,300. For the next 2 generations, Winchester would be doubling its workforce every 10 years. The company was a major economic factor not only for the city's tax base, but for the families Winchester employed. Fate again favored the Winchester name in the genius of John Moses Browning. He was, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, perhaps the most important individual in the history and development of small arms design. The story is told that John Moses Browning and his brother Jonathan Edmond were in their small second-floor workshop in Ogden, Utah, when in walked T.G. Bennett, vice president of Winchester. Having seen their gun, Bennett hopped a train in order to buy the patent for his company. For $8,000, Bennett not only got the patent, but he got 600 rifles the Browning brothers had manufactured, all for $8,000. Not since Benjamin Tyler Henry or Nelson King had the company had such an original gun designer. The 1885 Winchester catalog carried the first Browning-designed single-shot rifle. In the years that followed, many of his designs covered pages in the catalog. Although the Winchester plant people had to make some necessary changes in order to produce these guns, they were still his. The Browning-Winchester relationship lasted 20 years, and between 1883 and 1887 alone, the company bought 20 patents from Browning. Browning was the answer to the company's need for an exceptional designer and was a major factor in Winchester's continuing leadership in the production of repeating firearms.
In 1883, the Winchester Company again decided to produce a revolver. Now, this time it was not so much as a manufacturing project, but as blackmail.
When rumors began that the Colt Patent Arms Company intended to produce and sell lever-action rifles, which some thought were superior to the Winchester, T.G. Bennett decided to visit the Hartford gunmaker and show them the centerfire revolvers that they had ready for production. The guns had features not incorporated in Colt's. They struck a gentleman's agreement. Colt stopped making its lever-action rifles, and Winchester put its handguns back on the shelf. Under the leadership of Converse, the company saw its ammunition become world-renowned. Its lever-action Model 73 and Model 86 became the standard repeating rifle in America and much of the civilized world. Converse also made the decision for the acquisition of Winchester's rivals as well as put together the Ammunition Manufacturers Association. His contributions were equal to that of Oliver Winchester's. Thomas Gray Bennett, Oliver Winchester's son-in-law, became the third president of the Winchester Firearms Company since its incorporation in 1866 and became its driving force for over 25 years. Bennett saw the company through a period of increased sales and great profitability. He also oversaw the AMA, the Ammunition Manufacturing Association, which for years was able to effectively control the price and manufacturing of ammunition. Bennett led the company into the 20th century. By 1890, Winchester had become the leader in repeating arms and centerfire ammunition manufacturing with a worldwide name. Under Bennett, the company went from an independent contractor system to a foreman shop with tighter control by the factory management. Bennett also developed the Model 92 and 94, guns which could better utilize the new, more powerful smokeless powder. Winchester and America were changing. Both were entering the 20th century. The 1890-1900 catalog had items which were to become a tradition in Victorian America. The 1890 slide-action pump .22 caliber, the arcade gun used worldwide in shooting galleries, and the Model 94, which is still sold today, were two such guns. Also, the 1898 starter cannon, first offered in the Winchester 98 line, was to become an American 4th of July tradition. Used in July 4th celebrations and as a starter gun for bike races, sail regattas, and celebration salutes, it was first issued in black steel before eventually offered in stainless steel with rubber tires. In 1905, after several years of struggle, A new upstart company in East Alton, Illinois, Western Cartridge, under the leadership of Franklin W. Olin, was effectively able to break the price and product control of Winchester's Ammunition Association. Olin had been forced to build his own machinery and develop his own supplies because of the association's controls for the shot shells. Yet, in his struggle, Olin had become well known for just those shells. This circumstance, coupled with the added pressure of the Sherman Antitrust Act, caused the association to be dissolved by its membership in 1907. Franklin Olin had been able to take a powder company formed in 1892 and through determination and engineering ability create a major ammunition manufacturing facility. In time, the Olins and Winchester would become inextricably linked in the 20th century and eventually would form a company that became a symbol for arms and ammunition. John Browning was a familiar sight on the Connecticut scene in the late 1890s. For years, he had worked with Winchester in the design and development of their firearms. Yet by 1895, he was working with Colt Firearms on the development of the machine gun and the automatic pistol. In the Model 95 machine gun, or the potato digger as it was called, Browning had devised a mechanical way for using the gas expelled from a fired bullet to load and fire the next round in the firing sequence. This remarkable development pushed small arms into the era of automatic weapons. The Spanish-American War. It was America's first entry into major international warfare and the beginning of her position as an international power. The Winchester Corporation served America in her dress rehearsal for a world war in 1914. With his designs of the machine gun, Browning had also developed a semi-automatic shotgun and had begun work on the automatic pistol. Colt Firearms locked up the production rights with Browning for the machine gun and the pistol. This shrewd act enabled Colt to still use Browning's designs nearly 100 years later. T.G. Bennett, Winchester's president, made a mistake in the management of the company. He hadn't seen the benefit of the automatic shotgun, at least not enough to change the company's policy on royalty agreements. Browning, at a point in his life, wanted more than a buy-sell agreement. He wanted an ongoing payment for his designs. Bennett refused. Browning walked. Browning sold his gun to the Fabrique Nationale d'Armes de Guerre of Liège, Belgium. It took Winchester 10 years to design an automatic shotgun which did not infringe on Browning's patent, a patent which was originally researched and written by Winchester for Browning. Thus, T.G. Bennett, a man who had during his term of leadership demanded the highest standard for Winchester, planted some of the seeds which would almost defeat the company in the future. America, the West, and Winchester had moved to the 20th century at a time when films and broad-based communication were still in either the experimental stage or not yet dreamed of. The country was entertained by showmen. One of the most successful and popular was Buffalo Bill Cody. Cody had for 2 decades been able to bring the romance of the American West with its Indians and Annie Oakley to the people. A strong supporter of Winchester, he weaved its myth into the fabric of the romantic West. Yet, the myth, like the romance of the West, was beginning to face a stark reality in the 20th century. By 1910, the company had experienced a leveling off of sales and anticipated a 2% increase in sales annually. 1914 saw the company look to Europe to maintain its ongoing growth. In August of that year, Europe had exploded into the First World War. A veteran of supplying foreign governments with ammunition and weapon needs, Winchester was soon booked with over 5 years advanced business, an impossible load to meet for its production capabilities of the time. Orders from Europe poured in. The Russians ordered hundreds of millions of rounds of ammunition, as well as hundreds of thousands of Model 95 rifles modified to handle the 7.62 millimeter cartridge. The English contracted for 300,000 Enfield rifles. By mid-1915, Winchester had foreign contractors for the manufacturing of 400,000 rifles, Enfield and Model 95 configurations, and hundreds of millions of rounds. But the foreign contracts were troublesome and proved to be the financial ruin of the company after the war. The tremendous expansion program the factory undertook to complete these contracts made debts for the first time in almost 70 years. Not since the time of Oliver Winchester and the beginnings of the company was the fate of the company so uncertain. By February 1916, Winchester was in debt for $16 million, an incredible amount of money. Winchester was beginning to be eaten up by frantic expansion, a demon known to many businesses during the explosive years of World War I. The workforce grew from about 5,500 in late 1914 to over 17,000 by 1916. The company started to fall behind in the promised delivery dates of ammunition and rifles. By the beginning of 1917, all foreign contracts had either been canceled or completed. The company had a trained workforce, an enormous plant, and a $16 million debt to be met by March of 1918. In April 1917, the United States of America declared war on Germany. Rather than attempt to tool up their own arsenals, the U.S. government adopted a modified Enfield which private companies such as Winchester could produce. The gun was redesigned to take the Army's .30-06 rimless cartridges, which improved its dependability. The U.S. Enfield Model 1917 was born. Throughout the First World War, the factory's production was staggering. The factory had met the country's wartime needs and in so doing had jeopardized its peacetime life. The war was over. And the company's directors dropped a bombshell in late 1918. They informed the stockholders due to debt, rapid expansion, and inventory, they were forced to reorganize for survival. The Winchester family would never again control the destiny of its company. The last act of T.G. Bennett was the disposal of the company to the control of the Kidder Peabody Group. He saw it as the only choice the company had for survival. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company was now the Winchester Company, under the leadership of John Edward Otterson and Lewis K. Liggett. Otterson had virtually run the company since 1916 and was favored by Bennett. Liggett had established the Liggett chain of drugstores and was the logical fair-haired boy of the new controlling members of the Winchester Company. Diversification was the call word for the new company. Liggett was a born salesman and had the reputation of an expert marketer. So Winchester copied Liggett's marketing plan almost intact. what proved to be successful for drugs would not be for guns and other hardware. The company manufactured cutlery, eagle pocket knives, a complete line of work tools, batteries, flashlights, fishing equipment, ice skates, roller skates, baseball bats, a complete line of sporting goods, paint, paint brushes, and garden tools. At first glance, the new organization appeared to be succeeding. In fact, however, the company had created a new kind of monster. It now had its own retail organization. By 1923, the company was again in an untenable financial position. Otterson was forced to resign, and Louis K. Liggett took control of the company. He installed his own management group and went about the task of proving his original plan could succeed with proper management. The onset of the Great Depression in the latter part of 1929 brought matters to a critical mass by the end of 1930. Kidder and Peabody and Company refused to advance any more funds. The company of Oliver Winchester and Bennett was thrown into receivership in January of 1931. The industry was riddled with rumors. The doors were going to close forever. Investors were going to buy the company. Remington Arms was going to purchase its rival. Then, out of East Alton came an offer by Franklin Olin and his sons, which the receivership committee could not refuse. $3 million in cash and a guarantee of specified liabilities gave Western Cartridge Company Winchester. The company that had dared to challenge T.G. Bennett and the impregnable position of Winchester in the arms industry now was to give it a new lease on life. The Olins pledged personal securities to St. Louis banks in order to finance the acquisition, and John Olin moved to New Haven for 4 years to take over the former rival company and make it financially solvent.
He was an engineer, very meticulous man, a near perfectionist. He was very firm, but very fair. He accepted nothing except what he thought was best and what he thought was right.
Winchester was now a division of the Western Cartridge Company. It gave Olin a firearms factory, but further expanded ammunition and brass production as well. John Olin and his family had immediately poured money into the floundering company. They bought raw materials, had production orders placed, and made the Winchester machinery hum once again. The acquisition made Olin the largest owner of patents covering firearms and ammunition in the industry, and a vast pool for manufacturing and technical knowledge. When John Olin came to New Haven, he discovered an accumulation of new gun models and ideas which had been shelved by the old Winchester management. Combined with his own ideas on product and product design, he brought a new vitality to the company. Into production went Model 410, a pump-action repeating shotgun. Introduced was the Model 21, a double-barrel shotgun, a classic today. Improved was the Model 94. It became Model 55, or the deer rifle. Also revised was the Model 54, a bolt-action intended to handle the .30-06 cartridge. It soon became Model 70, the best bolt-action rifle on the market, with a new .270 cartridge, one of the most popular big-game cartridges ever produced. In the 30s, Winchester was very much alive again and delivering new products to the American sportsman. In 1937, the military operation received an order for a limited number of the newly developed Garand rifle, invented by John C. Garand of the Springfield Armory. Because of their excellent performance, the company became one of the outside contractors for the weapon. An order for 65,000 rifles was placed by the government. In time, the company would produce over 500,000. By 1938, the European continent was again headed into the jaws of total war. The American public, under the leadership of FDR, began to prepare. The military wanted a light rifle and a lighter cartridge. Winchester had been experimenting with a new device for the operation of semi-automatic rifles. The short-stroke piston developed by David Marshall Williams proved to be the system used on the new gun. Carbine Williams, a Winchester designer, would become famous for the M carbine, as would Winchester. In one of the most dramatic pages in arms design, Winchester, with only 34 days to do it, delivered a working model to the Aberdeen range for testing. The gun passed with flying colors, and Winchester had created the officer's rifle. As America entered the war in December 1941, Winchester would produce 800,000 of these M1 carbines and begin the most staggering arms and ammunition production rate in its history. The combined plants in New Haven and East Alton employed over 200,000 people during the war years and produced arms and ammunition as never before. Over 15 billion rounds of ammunition and over 1,400,000 M1 carbines and Garand rifles and other arms were manufactured. The company went to total war. In 1945, the war was over. Winchester Firearms resumed the pace of a peacetime arms manufacturer. Its two operations, military and commercial, set about once more the task of providing guns for sportsmen and soldier alike. America attempted to settle into a much-needed respite from a depression and a war by turning its attention toward family and productive growth. In 1952, John Olin, an avid hunter, established a conservation department in his company. He knew if the sporting business was to survive, it had to be directing its attention to gun safety and wildlife management. Nilo Farms, a preserve for fowl hunting and dog breeding, one of John Olin's favorite retreats, was established. A place where thoroughbred dogs could be raised and trained. Here, the techniques for game preserves were developed and shared with people throughout the sports world. The Korean War. A 3-year military engagement which taxed the war-worn public followed. The weapons just put aside from a world war were pulled out again. The M1 carbine, the Garand, and the BAR were again pushed into the hands of the American soldier. When the conflict ended, America, in its role of world prominence, was once again looking for a new military small arms standard. As with the Garand, the military, after much experimentation, settled on the automatic M14, a rifle which attempted to answer many needs. Winchester produced the weapon. The first M14s came off the production line in 1959. The company, during that first year, produced 35,000 M14s, and in the next 3 years, produced over 350,000. The military division of the factory was optimistic and very busy. In early 1961, the company got a contract from Colt Firearms, 18,000 barrels for a new weapon, the AR-15. This proved to be a specter of things to come. The first contract for the AR-15 was given to Colt in 1960 by the American Air Force. It was viewed as an improvement over the light carbine used by the Air Force security people. With America's involvement in Southeast Asia, some of the AR-15s were issued to the Nationals troops. Being lighter, they were favored over the heavier M14s and BARs. America issued them. By 1963, Winchester had produced over 300,000 M14s. In 1964, the program was stopped. The military work had come to a halt. The factory began to make cutbacks. In the commercial sporting line, an effort to economize was underway. The shotguns and Model 94s, so well known to their buying public, were changing. Machines, not labor, were producing parts. Castings rather than forgings were implemented. Buyers and distributors began to view the products as inferior. Sales began to fall. By the early 1970s, the company reverted back to the earlier production methods, but such a move was too late. The erosion of business slowly ate its way through the decade. The company fought rumors, strikes, and lack of business. In 1974, the ammunition operation was shut down in New Haven, and all Winchester ammunition came from East Alton, Illinois. The 70s for New Haven was a series of wins and losses. Just as it seemed that better days were ahead, the division was brought to its knees by a protracted strike in 1979. The 27-week struggle went on. The ammunition segment of the company was doing well. In 1980, the Firearms division appeared to be coming back. The gun line was the best in years. New product was favorably received by dealers and sportsmen alike. Winchester looked to be making a comeback. That year, the Olin's Board of Directors voted to sell the New Haven company. If the plant was not sold, it would simply be closed. One can only speculate as to John Olin's reaction to the sale plans. He had long been a protector of the gun company, but he surely realized that business meant profits, and that was not the case in New Haven. Despite underlying strength with improved product and market acceptance, poor financial performance was masking this turnaround. Once again, the market was awash with rumors about who would buy the company. Morale was low and potential buyers few. Olin decided to sell to a group of top management employees at Winchester and some individual New Haven businessmen. They felt if a lot of belt tightening and smaller product mix were employed, the legend of American gun making could survive. They collected a group of investors and a group of key management people and gave Oliver Winchester's company a brand new life. U.S. Repeating Arms Company was born July 1st, 1981. Olin Corporation had license rights and trademark rights. U.S. Repeating Arms Company set about to succeed, but it was not to be. In 1986, Oliver Winchester's company was once again bankrupt. The thought of ending a legend is difficult for some people to handle. U.S. Repeating Arms Company, Winchester Western, Winchester, New Haven Arms, the Volcanic Arms Company, all one, yet all different. Some were more successful than others, but all strove for a deliberate effort for quality and opportunity. 1987 saw a rebirth of the dream. The gun that won the West was to try again, this time under the leadership of a Boston businessman, Peter Alcott.
But the product is an excellent product. It still has a pre-64 image holdover, if you will. There are some things about today's crop of guns that are definitely much better than 1964. The company manufactures the finest sporting arms components of any company in the world. We have the finest rifle barrels that anybody makes, without question. We have the finest woods. We have forged steel receivers. I guess the challenge of it and the uniqueness of it is what gets me excited.
The energy is back. The dream is preserved. Oliver Winchester set the standard. John Olin set the pace. And the company set the legend. Winchester, the gun that won the West.